Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another heavyweight news mashup video today. And stick around if you're after some Mariusz Wach and Kevin Johnson coverage. That'll be at the back end of the video, as well as Wach calling out Martin Bakole for a rematch. But first off, starting with Oscar Rivas, who is injured. So his co-promoter Yvonne Michel has told The Athletic that Oscar Rivas versus Carlos Takam, which shaped up as a heavyweight slugfest, was set to headline ESPN on July 14 in Las Vegas. Now the fight is off because Oscar Rivas suffered a right elbow injury and requires arthroscopic surgery, and his promoter Yvonne Michel told that to The Athletic's Mike Coppinger. So Rivas set to undergo some surgery, but he will still be able to remain somewhat active. Here is another tweet from Mike Coppinger. Per Michel, Rivas will still be able to do some physical training, but will need 3 weeks of rest before gradually resuming full training. Should be ready by September, when they hope to reschedule Rivas to Takam. So this is not good news for Oscar Rivas. He's recently signed to the Top Rank stable. He was due to have a fight that was up in Canada ahead of the pandemic, but that card was called off. Wasn't going to be a great opponent or anything like that. It was going to be Devin Vargas. And now, post-pandemic, or towards the end of the pandemic, seemingly he was going to be facing Takam, although that fight had not officially been announced. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about a potential Carlos Takam and Jarrell Miller matchup. Takam and Miller both sort of indicating they want that fight. So Rivas Takam, that would have also been another good fight. Actually, Rivas is somewhat a younger version of Carlos Takam in many respects. Both smaller stature heavyweights, heavily muscled. They rely on, their inside game being explosive, although Rivas probably the more talented of the two. But that's a shame for Oscar Rivas being injured, right elbow injury requiring arthroscopic surgery. So a speedy recovery for him, hopefully. I don't know if that will be rescheduled, Rivas Takam. I'm sure that someone in the Top Rank stable, like a Jarrell Miller, maybe an Ajit Kabayel, someone of that ilk will end up facing Takam before Rivas is healthy. Takam has indicated he wants to get in the ring as soon as possible, but a speedy recovery for Oscar Rivas. Hopefully he gets well soon. The former IBF champion Charles Martin is urging Anthony Joshua to drop his IBF strap. And that's because Anthony Joshua, as you would have seen recently, and here's a shot on screen, has sustained a knee injury, and he is recovering for the best part of a month. He is set to face Kubrat Pulev at some point. But given that fight has not been scheduled yet, I'm not sure that this call out from Charles Martin to drop the belt makes any sense, but we'll get to Martin's comments. So speaking to BoxingScene.com, he said, as far as I'm concerned, that's the least he can do for me. I made his entire career. Without me, Anthony Joshua doesn't exist. I didn't train a day for him and went to his backyard hurt for my first defense. The not training part is on me because I thought Joshua was just another chinny, overrated bum. To this day, I know I was right about that chin. Joshua is going out of his way to fight Pulev. He says he don't want to give me my title back. This man should be more grateful. Let me knock Pulev out, and then you do for me what I did for you. Come to the United States and face me. This guy owes it to me. If I didn't go to the UK, Joshua would have waited years for a title shot, and he knows it. Charles Martin, so his statements to BoxingScene.com. And I don't know if he was on some goofball pills before he made those statements, or if he's being facetious, or if he really believes that. My recollection of events was Charles Martin effectively sold his title for millions of pounds to Anthony Joshua. And Joshua wouldn't have had to wait years. He was certainly in position to get a title shot sooner rather than later at that point. And he wasn't a bum at that point. He'd already had a couple of good fights under his belt, one being Dillian Whyte in particular. But Charles Martin, when I read that, the whole thing, the call out, drop the belt, makes zero sense for Joshua. And we're being told this injury to his knee is not actually that bad. It's a precaution that he's taking at the moment with the injury to rehab it. Effectively, it needs about a month to heal from what we're being told. So on the strength of that, Why would you drop the belt? Doesn't make a jot of sense to me. But Charles Martin, you can always bank on some hilarity from him. And I thought he must have been smoking something to make those comments. But yeah, okay, Charles Martin, that's... yeah, I'll leave it there. But what do you make of his comments in saying that he made Anthony Joshua? I'm pretty sure Joshua made himself by dropping Charles Martin, taking the belt, and then going on to do a number of other things in the heavyweight division, more so than what Charles Martin has done in his career. But make of it what you will. Dereck Chisora, who had been scheduled to fight Alexander Usyk, is continuing to talk about a pursuit into MMA. So you may have seen some different quotes in the last week or two about him making an appearance in Bellator, something like that. Here are some training shots from the other day, but now he's made some comments about training for MMA.
Then he wants the guy to come and box him. I'm going in Bellator. I'm going in with smaller gloves, you know, wearing the little jockstraw straps and stuff like that, and bareless, footless, basically, no shoes. So it's a big difference.
Whether he ends up going to MMA is anyone's guess. Is this for publicity? I mean, it's certainly an interesting angle if it is. American heavyweight Christopher Lovejoy, who's currently 19-0 and been calling out everyone in the division, has named what he believes are 5 realistic potential opponents. Guido Vianello, Jarrell Miller, Andy Ruiz Jr., Robert Helenius, and Dempsey McKean. And you can see here on this graphic that he's posted, those 3 guys in the middle of it, Miller, Ruiz, and Helenius, no show. But in terms of Guido Vianello, I'm sure they'd be willing to take that fight. Sam Jones, Guido Vianello's manager, has told me via Twitter that they're more than willing to fight Christopher Lovejoy. Dempsey McKean, who's got a couple of world rankings in the WBO and IBF, that's maybe more realistic, but let's face it, in any of these fights, Lovejoy at the moment, who's something 400 in the world, would be the B-side and ultimately would probably be getting paid pennies on the dollar. You know, he won't get the sort of paycheck that he thinks he commands right now, but seemingly he's been hanging around for a payday. Everyone wants to see how good is this guy who's been campaigning down in club shows in Tijuana off TV. No one really knows how good this guy is, but Vianello and McKean, they won't be big paydays. That's not the sort of money that he's looking for, and he's dreaming if he thinks he's going to get those other fights. But rounding out with Mariusz Wach and Kevin Johnson. So a couple of parts here. One, we'll talk about the fight, the weigh-in, and then also Mariusz Wach is calling out Martin Bakole for a rematch. Also, he wants to face Ajit Kabayal. That had been scheduled ahead of the pandemic, but had to be cancelled. So in terms of weighing in, Kevin Johnson, you can see here, 263.3 pounds on the scale. That's about 7 pounds heavier than his previous fight against Martin Bakole. That was last October. And Mariusz Wach, he is 274.5 pounds on the scale. That's more than 4 pounds heavier than his loss to Dillian Whyte in December in Saudi Arabia. And Wach, you can see here, he looks like he is not in great shape. Maybe he hasn't been sort of putting in as much work during the lockdown. But in recent years, him and Johnson, they haven't really been any great shakes. They've been brought in as opponents to lose. But in this situation, it's a pay-per-view. Wach is the A side. He is expected to win. But these pair of 40-year-olds, I wouldn't be expecting much in this fight. A lot of people, especially who saw the recent fight against Dillian Whyte, seem to be higher on Mariusz Wach than maybe they should actually be, because the performance in that fight was brought about by Dillian Whyte being at a career-high 270 pounds, looking woefully out of shape. He let Wach into that fight. In a normal circumstance, Mariusz Wach is not on the same level, and that fight was probably more competitive than it really should have been. But Wach is very faded at this point in his career, as is Kevin Johnson. So I'm not holding out much hope for this fight, which is a pay-per-view, I might add. It's 20 Polish zloty. It's about $5 US. It's about £4 in the UK. $7 or $8 in New Zealand and Australia. Elsewhere, if you do your conversion. But yeah, I'm not expecting much of this. I'm in two minds about getting it because I want to cover it for the channel, but it's one of these things that I think When it was first announced, there was more appetite for it because there was literally nothing else. But sport more broadly is starting to resume in some fashion. Some sports are up and running. And we've also now had some boxing. In this card, Kevin Johnson and Mariusz Wach, it's not a great main event. This is, if it was on a proper sort of big pay-per-view card, this would be somewhere near the bottom, or lower through the middle of the bill. Not a great fight. And I do question how much interest there will be in it. If it had been like a week after they announced it, might have had more interest. But I think as time's worn on, more sports are starting to resume. I do question how much interest will be in it. But I do expect this it's over 10 rounds, is going to be a fight that Wach wins, and it'll be a boring points decision. But in terms of Mariusz Wach, after this fight, if he wins, his manager has said that he wants Martin Bakole again. Bakole beat him up in 2019, but his manager, Rafael Bernacchi, says Bakole has some unfinished business with the Viking. That's why we chose Kevin for this fight, because of his last fight with Bakole. Mariusz was not in his best shape for his fight with Martin and was stopped. He overtrained and had nothing on fight night. We're still interested also in fighting Ajit. We just need to stay busy and be ready for when everyone is ready to reschedule that fight. And of those two potential options, Ajit Kabial and Martin Bakole, Wach loses to both all day, every day. He doesn't have much left in the tank, and for people who want to make a comparison because he put up some effort in that fight against Dillian Whyte, be honest with yourself. Wach is badly faded at this point. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.